The Nigerian government is proposing a hike in excise duty payable by the producers of carbonated drinks or soft drinks. The percentage tax, otherwise known as ad valorem, is expected to hit a high of 20%, and the manufacturers are unhappy with the proposal. But let's get down to the economics of excise duty as part of Nigeria's tax system and the broader economy and the people. And that's why I'm speaking tonight to Femi Awoyemi, who is a renowned financial analyst, a former banker and founder and chairman at ProShare Nigeria. Great having you on the show tonight. Femi, let's go straight to the big picture, the GDP. Give me your first word.
Well, today we got the GDP numbers out. It's in line. It's not basically a contraction per se, but it's in line with analysts' expectation, especially when you find out that we've had over 500 basis points in the interest rate. But if you take a look at the numbers as I'm seeing here, you'll find out that there were two major factors here. The oil sector, which contracted by 22.67%, and I believe it's also the industries, which contracted by minus 8.8% in Q3. Unlike the 2.3 which he had in Q2 2002. Now, the instance of these two major
oil sector around 56%.
Yeah, because you also, why I didn't call it a contraction was that you find out that in agriculture and in the services industry there were increases. Agriculture 1%, services 7%. We're basically more like a service economy now because we're not a producing economy. So you may be right when you use the word contraction, but the key question is this: that the contraction you see in the industries, and especially manufacturing, which also fell, means that producers are dealing with those headwinds which have come through all the way from 2021 up to date. And it's rather than abating, it's actually on a southward trend.
Okay, so that takes me straight to the how you place the latest GDP, slower GDP figure, 3.54% in second quarter, 2.25% in third quarter, within the context of the federal government looking to raise revenue through increase to about 20%. It's still a proposal, by the way, for the soft drink, so we don't know whether it will happen in the new year or not.
But you have to understand the numbers. Everything is in the numbers. If you look at the manufacturing sector that contracted, the food, beverage, and tobacco subsector also contracted by minus 4.05 in Q3.
The latest GDP numbers.
That in itself tells you that increasing those taxes on those producers in that sector will lead to further contraction. Now, there is a challenge in which you make policy in vacuum. I'm not sure that's what happened here. And I think the challenge is for us to understand what the numbers are saying. So on the one hand, we all agree that Nigeria has a debt problem and it needs to solve it. I mean, it has a revenue problem. He needs to solve it. And one of the most efficient ways is to look at taxation. But then you then have a bigger problem. You cannot do taxation in a high inflation situation or also most when you have lower increases in consumer income. No increase in consumer income. So who's going to pay the taxes?
Yeah, but we've got to balance the economics of production tax versus consumption tax.
Okay, so that's theoretical.
Excessive tax. Who do you tax?
So excessive taxing, either on production or consumption,
yes,
always leads to a negative
scenario.
So you're already taxing them on production, which is being borne by the producers. Now the producers cannot transfer it entirely all to the consumers.
They are doing so now.
So they are supposed to be able to absorb it because we assume that the product is elastic, right? Now, the other side, which is the consumption, which will be borne by the consumers,
yes,
we create what you call a Cobra effect. And you might find out what we've seen in the economy when you have such taxes on consumption. You see the saturation of the Nigerian economy, which means that production cannot sell at a higher volume and they start walking to the economy. So if you now say you pay more tax on what you're buying, but my income is not growing at the rate at which you expect it to go, so I'm going to have to make adjustments.
You're taxing manufacturers, you're taxing consumers.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, so I saw what the analysts at ProShare, the position and their view on the ad valorem tax is all about, alluding again to the latest Article 4 report on Nigeria by the IMF in terms of what the underlying and the undercurrent of the macroeconomics
are. It's important to understand what the ad valorem tax really is. Now, ad valorem tax taxes productivity. And it's if you measure the linear relationship, it takes on the economic recovery curve and looks at how things are improving. Then it takes a tax off that productivity. Yeah. You can't tax when you have a declining, because where is that coming? So it's a myth that if you tax more, in fact, the key question is not about the taxation, it's the rate of taxation. Is the rate of taxation by increasing it every now and then is there. But there's a fundamental problem here, which we have. So 5 months ago, you went into an agreement and you produced a finance bill and you said, oh, this is about 10 naira per every unit of production tax. You haven't even finished the whole year of seeing how that one has come out. And you've seen the numbers. Inventory pile up, investments dropping aside, and then you then come up with a new one. That's not even the old thing. Are you aware that government's also contemplating increasing the VAT?
These are some of the recommendations of the World Bank and the IMF.
I don't think we should just keep on looking at the World Bank and IMF. They're not running the country.
No, it's an advice.
They're not running the country for us. So here's this. If you check those advice, they give advice also on FX.
Yes.
They gave advice also on resolving the subsidy issue.
Yes.
They gave advice on what we needed to do in terms of our supply chain management. So if they gave you a basket of advice and you choose only one, it's not on them. It's on those who take the decision. So those decisions cannot be taken in vacuum. So on one side, if you do not address the problems that are affecting the producers themselves, i.e., the problem they have in customs. For example, why would customs be a revenue generating agency? It should be about data, it should be about all this. But then there is the inefficiency in there, whereby these companies are also paying huge demurrage for the delays in there. So there's what we are really paying for and what we are taxing. Maybe we should just say it, is that we are being taxed for the cost of the inefficiency in government.
In the system. And corruption.
So there's the direct tax, you see, but there's the unspoken taxes, which is the cost of inefficiency, which makes that every time you say you're doing a 10% tax, you might actually be effectively taxing that company by 43%, with multiplier effects on citizens, on companies, and indeed the government.
Well, soft drinks in Nigeria looks like a necessity for the man on the street, for those at the bottom of the pyramid, more as it were. But again, can we introduce another set of tax, for example, perhaps the sin tax?
Okay, so there's something you call the health tax. You may use the word sin tax.
Yeah, okay.
Which basically...
Tobacco, whatever.
Okay, so there's always a logic around this. There's a principle around taxation. Taxation is not just throwing up numbers. So you look at it that if we are taking care of health facilities, right, and one of you are drinking and you have need for dialysis or whatever, your liver, your kidney, or whatever is failing, we'll have to spend more because we are providing public health care. If you have problem with smoking as much as you want and you still have to use that one, so it's costing government a lot more to take care of you and fulfill its mandate. So there you introduce those same taxes. In this case, where you do not even provide
the basic health,
the basics, and then you just say, okay, we just tax it back. Okay, fine, you can do that. But tax it relative to how you understand the productivity is going.
That's a bit of an issue for me because at the end of the day, the manufacturers want to protect jobs. They want to be able to pay more tax to the government, and they want to be able to contribute to the growth of the economy. But here you are with this tax likely going to go higher. So we're caught right somewhere in the middle here because we've got to implement, we've got to generate more revenue. I don't know if you can think of something
if your manufacturing sector is a key contributor to your GDP.
Yeah.
But in most cases, it's actually a key contributor to your gross national productivity report. You then want to understand, how do I maximize value in that particular sector? So the manufacturing sector over these years have been complaining, but we saw the value of having a good manufacturing sector during the COVID, when we had supply chain management and we were able to produce things locally in here. So the whole idea is that from a national economic security position, you want to protect this industry.
Look inward.
Yeah, but we also know that those in the manufacturing sector also must be aware that we also need to find out how they can be more efficient in order to contribute taxes to the coffers of government to be able to run government. It is in meeting this middle road that we think that this ad valorem tax as a principle is not entirely wrong. It is about the timing, the rate, and not dealing with those other issues that would allow them to produce jobs, to create jobs rather, and to be able to contribute. But then we can pass it on to the public.
But aren't there genuine fears out there that if you tax the industry so much, many of these folks who are doing small and medium enterprises thing will go into what you call the dark economy?
Obviously. So there's a reason why you have an underground economy. If you tax people so much, all they need is people find means to, okay, so do you tax the man who makes the fura de nono? That's a huge industry. Right?
That's a huge industry.
Yeah, so which aspect of it do you tax? Exactly. What you should be doing is to find how you use tax to create incentives to bring them into the formal sector. So the whole idea is that we should be doing more things to bring people from the informal sector into the formal sector. Not this, what we do now, and I will say this, is that for those who are complying and paying taxes, you are making it much more harder for them, because the only thing the authorities focus on are those who are paying, not those
who are outside the net.
Thank you very much.
It's a good Thursday evening. I wish it's a TGIF, but again, next time you're going to get that. Thank you so much for your time, and do have a great evening. Femi Awoyemi, founder and chairman at ProShare Nigeria.